In his initial statement, Roy Clinton asked the Chief Minister to explain why he had been one of only 4 owners of a deluxe parking space in Midtown. Fabian Picardo has now published a series of documents setting out this explanation. One of these documents is a reservation agreement he signed to secure his parking space, which shows the size of the space he bought. A second document is the lease he signed and the plan attached to it, which included what he says is the useless area which every other similar purchaser had included. The Chief Minister says that the original designs of the plans for these extra large parking spaces included a physical restriction, a barrier which would have prevented a second car from parking there. And he says that these barriers were then removed for engineering reasons, decisions which he played no part in.
I and all the other purchasers at Midtown who bordered what is now known as a fallow area were able to have that added to our leases when it came to completion, although we had signed to reserve the spaces with smaller hatched areas not as part of our demise. Now, what happened was that, as I now understand, I've had to find out, the engineering advice which the constructor had suggested that they couldn't put in place some of the barriers they were going to put in place in different parts of the construction, because that would have affected the metal tensioning rods which are part of the construction of that car park. So what Mr. Clinton presents very negatively, in fact, is a benefit that has been had by everybody who purchased in the car park who bordered a fallow area. There's absolutely no advantage whatsoever which I have taken or which my family have taken. There's no advantage which I sought in exercise of my office as Chief Minister for my personal benefit, or indeed somebody else who Mr. Clinton wrongly implicated in this, the Financial Secretary. I mean, if you don't have any regard for my integrity because you're not a political opponent of mine, if there's one man who is deserving of having the respect and the regard for his integrity, it's Albert Mena, who does only the job that he is asked to do on behalf of the taxpayer and on behalf of the government. And Mr. Clinton casts wild aspersions very widely to catch him and me, and has little regard for how this affected everybody who was a purchaser in this new car park.
Mr. Picardo says there are a total of 38 similarly sized spaces throughout the building, not 4 as Mr. Clinton has suggested. He says some of these spaces are larger, some smaller, some cheaper than his, which shows that he has not had any special treatment in the acquisition of these spaces. So we've had a look at the schedule given to us by the Chief Minister, and we've come down to Midtown car park to look for ourselves and cross-reference some of these larger car parkings that are shown in the schedule. You can see, for example, the one I'm standing in here, and one just over the barricade, which has a different type of layout. So I put it to the Chief Minister, do all the car parking spaces that you refer to, these larger car parking spaces, have the same ease of access as yours?
So if you look at the numbers of people who enjoy this benefit at the time of completion, it affects about 37 others. Indeed, there are other spaces in addition to those 37 where you have, for a lower price even than I paid, the ability to park 2 vehicles. I don't actually have the ability to park 2 vehicles. If I look at my lease, I'm not able to do that, which the GBC van yesterday depicted, which was the reverse parking into my space. I can't do that because although I might physically be able to do that, I would be crossing a pedestrianised area, and indeed I would be in breach of my lease, which does not create that as an access to my parking space. But there are people who have paid less than I have paid who are able to park 2 cars in one slot, and indeed people who have paid a little more and are able to park 2 cars in one slot. So this is far from an individual benefit that I have taken the benefit of, or indeed that Albert Mena has taken the benefit of. It affects a number of other parking spaces, some of whom paid even less than we paid.
Mr. Picardo says Mr. Clinton's statements are clearly made with bad faith and malice, designed to lie simply to try and shred his reputation with the public.